Welcome to the Edged Rebs podcast. I'm Jenni Field.
I'm Advita Patel.
And I'm Trudy Lewis.
So in this episode, I want to talk about how to deal with things when you're feeling really overwhelmed. And I wanted to talk about it because it's something that comes up a lot for me with people that I mentor and coach. And it's something that comes up a lot with some of my family members and friends. And I think it's something that all of us can feel time to time, that feeling of being very overwhelmed by things. And because it's something that's come up so much in the conversations I've had recently, I thought it's probably a topic that's relevant for people that are listening to our podcast, because it's something that we hear sometimes in our coaching retreats, not so much, I don't think, trying to reflect on the last 3 that we've done. I can't remember anyone really coming in with this, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. But I know that when it got to December 2022 for me, I was certainly very aware that, I think I said to you both, I feel like I'm in a tornado and I can see everything spinning around me, but I can't get hold of anything. I can see it and it's all quite clear, but I can't grab it, and I don't know what to grab first, or I don't know what to grab. And that, I suppose, for me was that feeling of being very overwhelmed by the amount of things I had to do. And then in come sort of January, February, I was like, I'm in sort of a hazy fog. The tornado has passed and there's just this fogginess in front of me. But I think it's something that we can often all feel. I think it's something that maybe we feel and experience it differently. I've just said then about the tornado sort of feeling. But I suppose from an overwhelmed feeling, whether you two have sort of felt that and what that does feel like for you. And I'll come to Advita first.
Every day. Every single... No, I think it's more common than we think it is.
Yes.
I think a lot of people feel that they can't really say they're overwhelmed because it feels like they can't cope.
Yes.
And when you can't cope, people then question your ability to manage your time well. And then judgment starts, and when judgment leads to shame, as we all know. So I think a lot of people keep it quite closed in if they're feeling overwhelmed, and it's the whole, I'm fine. I always think about Ross.
I always think about Ross in Friends.
Ross in Friends, by the way.
With the margaritas.
Yes.
Margaritas. I'm fine. Who else is fine? Yeah. I'm fine.
And you can see it in people when you say, how are you doing today? I'm fine. Quite short, snappy, looking a bit anxious. So I think I think we need to be more open about talking about overwhelm, which is why I'm really pleased that we're doing this episode today. And for me, it's always a bit like spinning plates, and it's always that worry that one of these plates is going to drop. And if one drops, it's like a domino effect and they're all going to crash. So it is a bit like a tornado, but I just visually imagine the plate spinning.
And that's how it feels for you. I've got all these plates spinning.
There's loads of plates.
And one's going to fall.
Some are really steady and I'm okay, but one day if someone nudges it, it's going to topple.
It's going to just tip. We're just going to tip.
And it's going to tip. And then from the reaction I often have with overwhelm is doing nothing.
Yes. Yeah. Just going to stop.
There's a lot going on. I'm just going to sit in silence and I'm going to stare out the window and I'm just going to stop. And it's not even procrastinating either. I'm just silent.
Yes.
Because it gets to that point where you're like, what is going on?
Well, it's that old expression, isn't it? You can't see the wood for the trees almost. So you just...
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah. Because you just said, I can't see the trees for the
other way around.
God, a pair of you.
The trees for the woods.
The trees for the woods. And I think that's true. Sometimes it's just, you can't do anything because there's so much to do that you just can't even start.
Yeah.
How does it feel for you, Trudy? Or are you a overwhelm-free zone?
I wish I was. I really do. It translates a little bit in anxiety, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can't sleep. Well, I can't sleep anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not a great sleeper. But what happens is I have that thing where I'm like, it's all kind of like going like this. Sorry, nobody can see me.
It's all flashing in front of you.
It's flashing in front of me. And so each thing keeps flashing because... it's like the build-up of everything. So it's like flash, 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 flash. So throughout the evening, going into the night, I'm lying down in my bed wanting to relax. And then all I get is these flashes of this needs to be done. This is happening. This is happening. This is happening. And I actually just pick up my phone and start playing a game.
What game are you playing, Trud?
2 Dots.
Oh, nice.
So I'll do that because... it's probably one of the only things or the few things that are it's instant. It's an instant switch off. A little bit like sitting quietly and just staring into space. Yeah. It's a little bit like that because it hits you. It's late at night. I have no idea. It's not like I'm going to get up late. I mean, I have done it on occasion, gotten up and gotten the notebook and started to write to-do lists and stuff like that. But then I definitely won't be able to sleep after that. So it is kind of intense, and then I start to get anxious because I'm like, I need to control. I need to get this done. I need to get this done.
The notebook thing's interesting. That's always something people say, isn't it? Like have a notebook next to your bed and you can write things down. I'd be so awake if I did that.
The minute
I would start, I'd be like, oh, well, I might as well just stay awake now and just get it done. Now that I've written down, I've got to do
my
it.
laptop?
Yes, I'm up. It's 2 a.m.
I'm going to start
forget
working.
it. I'm going to start.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's there's definitely something about it feeling a bit different to each of us. I've said it's like a tornado. You've said it's spinning plates. You've said it can be quite anxiety inducing and impacts your sleep. I think it impacts us all really differently. And I think it impacts us all through different ways. I really like what you were saying, Advita, about the fact that we don't talk about it very much because it's so linked to being able to cope. And we live in a society today where if you can't cope, then you're weak and not resilient. And look at everybody else having it all with their social media highlight reel and you can't cope, which is just not a helpful narrative at all because we all cope in different ways and we all have different ways of managing things in our life. But I think feeling overwhelmed can sometimes be triggered by maybe relationships at work or your boss not being very helpful or confidence or, in a leadership role, maybe not being equipped to lead. I'm trying to think about what are the things that might be going on for people that might lead to that feeling of overwhelm.
Struggling to say no.
Yes, massive one.
And it's other people's priorities that are being pushed on you sometimes because, if you're in a leadership role, if you're at work, some of the times it's the hammering of you need to get this done, this is important for us, and it's the list of things to get done that aren't necessarily your priorities directly, but they're other people's, and so you take it on.
I think guilt plays a big part in this. I think, the folks that I've worked and spoken with about overwhelm, they often say, oh, I haven't spent enough time with my daughter, my son, and my child.
Yeah.
I need to take them to soft play. Worst nightmare, but still, soft play. I know parents were related. I've been with my friends to soft play, but I need to take them there. But I still got to deliver X, Y, and Z for the X person. I need to go to my friend's birthday party. I need to buy a present. And I'm like, just slow it down.
Do you think this? We're going into Brene territory, our friend, and I'm just thinking about her book Atlas of the Heart, which I don't have in front of me, but it's a really good book looking at the different emotions that we feel. We'll put a link in the show notes to it. But I'm wondering if overwhelm is a result of an emotion of guilt, and that it comes completely from that. Because if I'm thinking about feeling overwhelmed, when I was in the tornado, I definitely didn't feel guilt. That wasn't it then. I think that was just, I don't know what the emotion was.
Overwhelmed.
But maybe probably a little bit of burnout if I'm reflecting honestly on that. There was a definite, I really can't see the wood for the trees because I'm quite exhausted. But if I think about when you were just talking about all the things you've got to do, if I think about, I want to, see my family, I want to see my friends. Oh, I've forgotten to say someone's birthday. I need to buy someone a new house card. Oh, I need to go to the butcher's or the supermarket. Or I need to do all these things. And then that's where the guilt, I think, for me would start to come in, that I'm not showing up in enough places. I'm not present enough, which we've talked about this season. I'm not showing up. I'm not making the time because I'm trying to do too much stuff and I'm overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things I need to do. But that's coming from a place of feeling guilty that I'm not being able to do those. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's fully guilt though, because I think overwhelm comes from an emotion. So to your point, you said, some of it is not necessarily that you feel guilty, but I think it comes from a quite emotive place because of the fact that you probably feel, or anybody really, it's that feeling of, I want to do my best for my family. I want to do my best for my friends. I want to always be there for work and for people and for all the different things that I have in my life. I want to show up for each one of those things, and I want to show up in a certain way. And so if I don't do that, then I've let myself down a little bit. It doesn't necessarily have to go as far as guilt, although I think guilt is a is one of the drivers, but there are other emotions that are at play that are pushing you to feel overwhelmed, because it's that fear of not being there, not being in the place. You hear of people all the time saying, "Oh, I'm so afraid that they'll grow up and they won't know me," when it comes to their children. So it's I think it's a lot of things, but it is very emotive generally. So yeah. So I don't
know where that comes from, Advita.
I think it comes from pressure externally and society. I think we're in a world now where we're expected to do more for less. There's always this pressure to keep delivering regardless of what is happening around us. And there is an element of guilt, obviously, but there's also an element of letting people down. There's also an element of letting yourself down. There's also this whole, if I don't do this, am I not good enough? Or will I be good enough? There's always this kind of unspoken competition, I would say. And
standards you've set for yourself, isn't it?
It's the standards, and it's this whole kind of unspoken competitive thing, either with yourself or with others, that you kind of think, I just need to say yes. I just need to say yes. Because if I don't say yes, they will think I'm not smart enough, not clever enough, I don't want to do it. I think that's what often leads to it.
Are there two sides to that, though? Because there's an element of one trying to do it all from societal pressure, but I'm very good at trying to do it all because I'm trying to do it all. So there's a song that I heard a few years ago. It was on a programme called The Dropout, which was a dramatisation of a true story on Netflix. And it's a song called I'm in a Hurry. And I'll put the link to it in the show notes because I'm often playing it because it's like I'm in a hurry to get things done. I don't know why. And so I have to sort of play it every now and then to remind myself that I'm not in a hurry. Like I can just be. And actually, this can be a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. It doesn't have to be a 2-week plan. And I'm very aware that I can overwhelm myself, probably. And
we're impatient. We're all.
I think I'm quite patient.
So I think the world around us has stopped us not wanting to wait for things because everything is so immediate. Everything. Yeah. The way we access our series on Netflix, now they dump them all in you can watch 8 seasons and 8 episodes and forever thing. So you don't ever have even adverts, you can fast forward them, you don't have to wait. You can get onto the internet within 30 seconds, unless you live where I live, where it's like 30 minutes, but anyway. But everything is so quick. Yeah. And I think that kind of pressurizes us to be quick and in a hurry. And part of it is, I want to just hurry up and just do this because I want to show it. And I am guilty of this. And a part of this is, I just need it off my list. Yeah. I need to get it off my list because it's really bothering me. And I think when you have too many of those things, then the overwhelm starts. The overwhelm I also think starts when you have no goals or intention. And we've spoken about this before in a previous episode. When you have no clarity and you are stuck, and you're stuck, and it's not even a crossroads, it's like multiple roads. You just end up kind of doing a lot. A real example I'll give is when you're applying for a job. So a lot of the people that we all work with are often looking for new opportunities or promotions and things like that. And they will be a scattergun approach in terms of where they're applying for opportunities, to the extent where they don't even know why they've applied for that opportunity and what is happening. And then they'll overwhelm themselves. I've put in, I had somebody who said to me, I've applied for 47 jobs. I've not heard back. Oh my God. I know, in a period of 2 weeks, I've not heard back. I'm like, where are these 47 jobs? What industry are they in? What kind of role is it? What kind of salary is it? What are your non-negotiables and negotiables? Because once you can identify, you have a bit of a plan, then you can stop that overwhelm of, oh my goodness, where am I up to with these people and what have I said? And I think that's a very practical example, but you can apply that to most things, I would say, in terms of the overwhelm you bring yourself when there's no actual intention or plan.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's really interesting how life things, so life admin type stuff, I always find a bit of overwhelm there because there's, in and amongst all of the business stuff and all of the work things that I have to do, then I've got personal things. And I always think about the fact that I don't have children, I'm not married. So basically, that wasn't an advert, but
so feel free to drop us a DM.
You said that, not me. So basically, I admire those people who, and I'm sure some of them do feel overwhelmed, who have children husband, work, home life, personal, the whole kit and caboodle, and I don't have all of that. But at the same time, when it starts to hit you, the volume of things that need to get done, whether it's, pay your taxes or pay this bill or so on. So sometimes that can add to it.
But it's interesting when you talk about that, because none of us have children. We've always talked about that on the podcast. And when you were saying that then, it's almost like, do we feel like we don't have permission to feel overwhelmed because we don't have the complexities of other people? Which I know we've all talked about the fact
I'm over that. I used to.
I think
I used to, but I don't feel that anymore.
I think some people in our world may make us feel guilty for feeling overwhelmed because we don't have the same level of responsibility that they do. And that's on them.
Yeah.
100%. And that's okay for them to think that about us, but I think it's really important for us not to take that guilt.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because I think you're right. The life admin stuff, and I've been late RSVPing to two family weddings this year because I'm not home. I'm not home. I'm not. It's not stuck to the fridge, so I forgot to do it. And it's those things that you just constantly thinking. I feel like I'm behind. And when I was reading or listening to Eat the Frog this year, which I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. Basically, he's saying like you will never be on top of it. You will never be on top of it. And I say this to people all the time. A to-do list is going to be forever at work because it's a job. You're there forever, hopefully, but you're there for a long time. It's not like, right, I've done my to-do list. This is now completely finished and I should leave.
Absolutely nothing to do.
Because that's not a full-time job.
No.
So, managing that and being able to condense that down into chunks of time, and we'll talk about some of that in the tips, but it was quite nice to be walking along, listening to the book and just being reminded that you will never feel like you're on top of it. And even though we all do things like, I've got my inbox down to
165,
88, from 500 and something. Note that Trudy hasn't mentioned how many emails are in her inbox because she's already
even going to bother.
I'm not going to share. But that feeling of I feel like I'm on top of it. I feel like I'm in control, and I think that's what overwhelm ultimately comes back to, is finding the tips and techniques that help you feel in control of whatever it is that you're feeling overwhelmed about. And I think that's difficult to then pinpoint what that, I don't think there is or maybe there is, one source of feeling overwhelmed. I think for me, it's always been, I'm just generally feeling overwhelmed. It's not like I'm specifically overwhelmed about this.
Yeah.
For me, it's all encompassing.
I'd say the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say it was one thing that ever overwhelms me. I think it's the accumulation of all of the things as it relates to time as well. So maybe I might be thinking of, gosh, I've got a lot of things to fit in by a certain amount of time. And they have to be done by this time or else there's going to be a problem. Or when you're traveling and, you need to get all these things done. And obviously when that happens, I find a list really useful because then I think, do you know what? I'm just going to list, when it comes to the deadlines, I'm going to list what's required for those deadlines. And then instantly that lifts the pressure because now I've got it in front of me.
Yeah.
And then I might do something like put the whiteboard up and put it in front of me so that I'm like, every time I start to get worried about it, I'm like, no, I've already done the list. I know I know how I'm going to tackle this.
Yeah.
So it's the planning.
Yeah. For me, it can be one thing that leads to the dominoes effect for everything else.
It's that plate, isn't it? Like you said
It's a
earlier,
plate,
it's one plate goes.
That's it.
And the rest have gone.
And then I can feel myself not wanting to make decisions or give answers to questions. I'm like, why are you asking me? Because you own the business, Advita. Oh, okay, fine. But it's that kind of getting to, because you're like, oh my God, there's so many questions and you have to be, I was just thinking while you two were talking, it's like that responsible adult. And I still feel like a 17-year-old at times. And then when something happens, I'm literally looking for a responsible adult. Like, who can answer this very important question?
I need a grown-up.
It's you.
I need a grown-up to tell me what to do with this tax bill. Like, what is going on?
My husband always says that. He'll often say, like, sometimes he'll come home and I'll be being silly or something in the kitchen and he'll be like, have you been a grown-up all day today? Like, yes, I've been a grown-up all day today, so I need to be a bit silly now.
It's so important to have that child humour back.
Yeah.
And I think we just don't, I always say to, the dreams we had as children are almost kind of bashed out of you, aren't they? By the time you get to the age we are, it's like, don't be silly. You can't think of that. Oh, you need to be serious. And how are you going to earn money if you don't do it this way? And I think we forget about the child playground effect almost.
Well, we don't play. We don't play at all. And what's interesting...
Unless you're playing two dots.
Unless you're playing two dots. But what we do is we conform to something that somebody's told us an adult should look like.
Yes.
So we there's a lot of conforming that goes on. And so as a result, we put ourselves under this extreme pressure to become, a serious adult. By the time I'm this age, I'm supposed to be sensible.
Yes.
I'm not supposed to be making silly decisions. I can't fool around, whatever that looks like, and so on and so on. So when you say to somebody, sorry. Well, yes, you can't fool around and do silly things. You've got to be decisive. You've got to make sure that if you've taken on something, you've got to have the responsibility of fulfilling it, and so on and so on and so on. And you've got some people who, even in their mind, has almost like a persona that they need to achieve, which then demonstrates that they're now an adult. And I think it's difficult. You can't really tear that down because some of them, that was learnt from when they were in their families and so on. But it's hard to live that way because at the end of the day, that's what causes the overwhelm.
Yeah, it's that pressure. It is the pressure. Yes, under pressure. I won't sing. But I do think it's the play thing is really interesting. There was a book that I read last year called Essentialism. Again, put the link in the show notes. But it talked about the importance of play, and it talked about a study that was done with grizzly bears, I think. And those that didn't play, I know.
Not with grizzly bears.
Well, I'm going to go and play with some grizzly bears. I think I might die.
Dangerous game.
Exactly. I was thinking bears and
disclosure.
Don't do that, people.
Don't do that. Don't go and play with grizzly bears. It was a study done on grizzly bears playing with each other that showed that those that played lived longer. And it was basically saying that if we don't play, we won't live as long. And we need elements of play. And true play is when you're doing things for no end goal.
Yes.
So you're doing something for the pure enjoyment of it without there. So going to the gym for me is not play because the end goal is to be stronger, fitter, healthier. Although I love it. I've learnt to love it, I should say. But it is like, what do we do that is true play?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I know the three of us spend a lot of time, I feel like, at play. Like a lot of what we do when we're together, having dinner or lunch or catching up is always, there's no end goal to that time together. That's just us hanging out. And I love that. And I think people don't play enough because we're so consumed with this conforming to being a grown up, ticking things off the list, getting that done. But to what end? I think, I'm always coming back to the book by Stephen Bartlett, Happy, Sexy Millionaire. And we talked about Stephen in a very early season. I want to say season 1 or season 2. Because Trudy and I didn't know who he was at the time.
I introduced you to
and you were horrified at us for not knowing.
My
It
best
was
mate,
you
Stephen.
that introduced us. Yeah. Your mate.
My mate Stephen. We'll go with it. And he talks about in his book about that journey of sort of when I get there, I'll feel like this. And when he made, The Millionaire and he sold the company, he said I wasn't happy. It was a bit like, well, what do I need to do to get there? And I think that's so linked to the pressure and the overwhelm and all of those things that we can feel quite a lot of because of society and that conformity. I want to move us into tips because we've touched on some a little bit, but I think all of us have got different techniques and things that we use to manage feeling overwhelmed. And I know for me, I'll kick us off with a couple, but certainly when I was in that time in December where I was in the tornado, what helps me is mind mapping. So lists don't help me, first of all, because it needs to be slightly more visual and a bit more scrappy. So I'll nearly always have sort of blank sheets of paper or a bigger notebook in my bag that I can sort of get a big pen out and I sort of work out what are the buckets of things I'm trying to do and then what are the things that are needed just to try and get it out of my head and sort of mapped onto paper. That really helps me. And then another one is if I'm talking to some of the people that I'm coaching, and if we're talking about this feeling of overwhelm that's almost being done to you sometimes in these situations, like in an organisation, I've got so much on my to-do list. There's so much I've got to do. I don't know how to cope with this amount of stuff. one of the things I always say is think about what it is you absolutely have to do. So we can assume sometimes that what we need to do for a task is more than it is, but sort of, contracting or discussing what's the deliverable, what do I need to do, almost what's your minimum viable product, what's the least amount of stuff I could do to get this done. Work that out, because sometimes that overwhelmed feeling comes from putting that pressure on yourself of thinking I've got to do all of these things, when actually you just need to go to a meeting once a month for that thing. You don't need to do all these other things that you're thinking you might have to do. Let's step back and just be really clear kind of what's there. And then I suppose the other one for me is helping people think about it being much smaller. So bringing your focus into a more immediate time frame. So the overwhelm for some people I work with can be because of just the magnitude and everything feels huge and there's so much, there's not enough time. Right, well, let's just focus in on what we're going to do tomorrow or next week or the next 2 weeks or the next 30 days. It depends how overwhelmed you're feeling as to how short the time frame needs to be. We tend to work in 90 days, but I know all of us will go to 30 if we need to. And certainly in the pandemic, I was talking to a lot of people about, let's just look at 30 days. And for some, it was 2 weeks. So having that time frame is really helpful. They're the ones that spring to mind for me most. Well,
I the big one I would say is just say no.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Just say no. That's a song from Grange Hill, isn't it? I'm showing my age now. It was drug related.
Oh wow! Well,
really?
Just say no to that as well.
I was like, I don't know. I'm not going to sing again. I've already sung once on this one.
Hill ever.
Have you not? No. Oh, well, I'll find the Just Say No song on YouTube, and we'll pop a link in the show notes.
For drugs and tasks, just say no. But it's really important to say no. Like, I am not doing this. I'm sorry. Not even sorry, actually, and do not apologise. Taking my own advice on board.
Catch yourself there.
Caught myself there. But it's to say, thank you for the opportunity, but right now I'm unable to do this, but I can pick this up on XYZ. If it feels uncomfortable for you to just say a flat no. There's nothing wrong with just saying no without having to give an explanation. People feel they have to give an explanation, but you could just say no.
Yeah. I think
stop.
One of the things linked to that for me is to say, I can do that, but if I do that, it means I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
So give them a consequence of that request so that you're being clear about the impact it has on your time.
Always ask them about priorities.
Yeah.
So this is what I've got. These are the 5-6 things I've got to do today by the close of play today. If you want me to add this on to the list, then which of these priorities do you want me to take away?
Yeah.
And that's a fair question for you to ask anybody who's asking you to do stuff on there. But this also applies to personal life. And I think sometimes when we do have the guilt, if you do feel guilt for not saying yes to things, you don't have to go to a friend's birthday party on a Friday night if you feel absolutely exhausted and you've got lots going on. There are alternatives you can do. And if they're a true friend, they will be okay, in my opinion. They will not hold against you. They won't have any grudges. They will be like, fine. It's absolutely okay, look after yourself. And that's a true friend. And I think this is the other thing that we need to be mindful of about the people that surround us and the support they are giving us. And there should be, with 3 of us, we know each other well enough now to spot the overwhelm in each one of us, right? And I think that's what a friendship does. They should be able to be like, they are not doing well. What can I do to support you? What do you need from me? Do you not feel any pressure to come to my party or come for dinner? Let's wait until you're ready. That kind of conversation. So just say no is a big one. The other tip is a very simple tip, which works for me, is, apart from staring at the window and all that stuff, is to...
Rocking in a corner.
Is to make a cup of tea. It's that simple action of doing something. So for me, it's going into the kitchen, putting a kettle on, putting a tea back, and following those steps to slow down my brain racing. And it helps with anxiety as well. And just taking those 4 or 5 minutes, making... If you brew it properly, by the way, not a dip and out.
Some people like a dip and out.
I know.
That's another episode. I'm
very sorry.
However, 4 or 5 minutes of doing a different activity can really make a difference to overwhelm. And that is where I'm going to stop. Moving on to Trudy.
Thank you very much for doing that in the middle of a laugh. The ones I came up with were leaning towards play and being a bit lighter with yourself. So, don't be too hard on yourself is one. Find something creative to work on. I used to, and I go back to this when I feel really kind of stressed. I do go back to this occasionally. Is colouring, because it's a little task that in a few minutes will just get me calm. You know, just sitting there and colouring.
Yeah.
And then I can get up and go back to whatever I'm doing. And linked to that is taking a pause. So taking a step back and pausing for a little bit and giving yourself a little bit of space and time to think through, well, hang on a minute. It's not as fatal as I think it is, you know, because sometimes that's the thing. We've made it much, much bigger. I think you were saying something similar to that, Jenni, when you were talking about making the tasks smaller and looking at time, because sometimes we make the task and the thing so big and so complicated, and then you sit down and you do it and it takes you 5 minutes to do it, and you're thinking, so why did I think that was going to take me 3 hours to do when it actually just took 10 to 15 minutes?
We are very guilty of fatalizing everything, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like we always think of I think that's just
think of the worst.
It's how our brains work.
It's our brain. Like we always think of the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And the lion's going to kill me, he's not going to bite me.
Yeah.
Although either one would be bad.
Either one would be bad. I'm not sure I want to bite or to die, either one. But one of the things when we do our mental resilience workshops and training is catastrophizing is quite a big one to be mindful of. And if you do experience anxiety or you experience depression or any of those things, catastrophizing is often where we can go.
Yeah.
And then the last one is having a bit of gratitude. So in and amongst being fatalistic, it's interesting how if you pick some of the things that you're catastrophizing about and you attach some gratitude to it, you realize that actually it's not as bad as you think. So, but also practicing gratitude just generally moves your attention away from all of the millions of things that are flying through your mind. And sometimes when I'm lying in my bed not sleeping, I will do that. I'll kind of think to myself, actually, it's really great that this happened, or it's great that I know that it's busy, but it's good that that's happened because I've now got extra work, or I've got, it's a positive thing rather than looking at it as a negative. So all of mine are kind of tied in together.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to all the tips because there's something in there about being a combination of slowing your thinking, so having a technique to help you slow your thinking, whether that is making a cup of tea, whether it is colouring in. You know, for me, it's often, going out for a walk without any headphones or noise on because we need a bit of quiet. But there is this combination of doing something to help you slow your thinking and then something as an action to help you step forwards, whether that is making a list, whether it is, talking to somebody through what's going on. But there is definitely a slow your thinking and take action that I think will help people with their overwhelm. Yeah. Which I just think has been really interesting.
Yeah, really good.
I mean, we've had lots in today. We've had, some slightly inappropriate comments. A little bit of
all driven by you, Jenni.
I was going to say.
Don't overwhelm me. Thank you for listening. If you want to find out more or subscribe to our newsletter, visit calmedgedrebels.com. We'd love to continue this conversation, so please connect, ask questions, and share your thinking with us. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn under Calm Edged Rebels. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review us.